What's good? It's Woog. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Well, it's that time of year again. Towards the end of every year, music obsessors like myself dive into their favorite publications' best of lists, specifically albums. Pitchfork, Rolling Stone, Complex, Spin, NPR, NME, KCRW, The New York Times, certain Spotify playlists. These outlets and the like shape the historical hierarchy along the musical spectrum from mainstream to indie to underground of how these artists and albums are viewed. When you hear this critically acclaimed album, these distinctions and best of year list placements often add to the reputation of these artists and can imply something about their quality or at least their exposure and notoriety. These are huge credibility builders so that the next time this artist drops, they're already riding a wave of momentum from the critical hype, which makes things interesting because music is a preference, it's subjective, it's taste-based. It's not like sports where if somebody's averaging 30 points a game, they are usually the better scorer than the person who averages 8 to 10 points a game. Obviously depending on minutes played per game, but so when 20 major outlet writers or critics say that Tame Impala's Lonerism is great, or that Frank Ocean's Channel Orange and Blonde are such monumental artistic statements, that's actually empowering subjective analyses with objective ramifications. So if you get the exposure and then the critical love from a group of these writers, you elevate yourself way up these festival lineup bills from the tiny print at the bottom of the flyer to at least the mid-sized fonts in the upper half of the thing. And if you can deliver what's critically considered an instant classic, then boy... See, this is different from the impact of commercial success. With that, you've got objective measures that are showing, if nothing else, that a bunch of people are streaming and purchasing your music. But with critical success, regardless of sales and streams, these album rankings, an 8.7 from Pitchfork, back in the day, a 5 mics or 4.5 mics from the Source magazine, a 9 out of 10 from Spin, or 4 stars, 5 stars, or my favorite and probably the best indicator, an 8.0 or an 8.8 in Metacritic, which takes all the major publications and averages all of their scores for an album together, creating a Metacritic rating. These scores matter, but for non-quantifiable reasons. These aren't necessarily platinum selling artists, and these artists generally aren't performing on SNL anytime soon. But my main point is, don't let anyone get you to think that they are hearing all of this music, or even only the pop albums, or rap albums, or indie albums. There's at least a handful of albums from, let's call them relevant artists, released every single week, and another couple handfuls of albums from less relevant, new, or maybe former relevant artists being released every week. Each album varies in length from a half hour to an hour and a half, normally somewhere well in the middle of those two extremes. Now, I'm not going to sit and do the math here on the volume of albums versus hours in a week, but the reality is that nobody's listening to all of this music. An entire staff of writers couldn't get to all of this music, let alone an individual critic. So, critics, let me ask you, did you or the people at your outlet really listen to Ariana Grande's Thank You Next, Billie Eilish, Vampire Weekend, Lana Del Rey, both 2019 albums from Big Thief, both albums by DaBaby, both albums from King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, Currency's 9 projects from 2019, 8 of them, 7, Beyonce's Homecoming live album, Solange's latest studio album, Little Sims, Lizzo, James Blake, Sturgill Simpson, the new Styles P, and 70-year-old Bruce Springsteen's 19th full-length album, Western Stars? Well, did you? And if you even tried to really keep up with this massive conveyor belt of albums dropping, and then more albums, week after week after week, are you listening to any of these twice? What does it require to really take in and absorb an album? And if you listen to an album 3 times, with several days in between the listens, did you feel the exact same way about it the 3rd time that you did the 1st time? Is it better than you remembered? Worse? And this listening effort, by the way, takes away from the time that you could possibly spend reliving one of your old favorites from last year, 5 years ago, 10, 20, 50 years ago. Hey, bruh, you only have 2 ears, and unfortunately, you cannot task them with different assignments at the same time. So critics, outlets, can we perhaps cut the shit and preface our lists with some disclaimer that we didn't cover everything that's worthy of consideration? That we have even missed out on some pretty big ones that would get us kicked out of the cool music fan club? Look, there's nothing to feel guilty about, but I get the feeling that an echo chamber develops where critic A says that this new music is great, then critic B caught the praise either from reading critic A's review or from fans who read critic A's review, so critic B's got to get up on that. Now this new music has multiple critical shout outs, and more fans hear about the hype, and now they've got to listen, and they often come into the listen having heard that this is a possible classic. This album is more than an album. It's a statement, a masterpiece. You've got to be on board with this, or there might be something wrong with you. You just don't know a real classic when you hear one, do you? All of this can influence the listener one way or another. They either come in wanting to buy the hype and come out like, yeah, man, this new Radiohead, it's really special. Really special. Or they go the other way, rolling their eyes at the hype and coming in thinking this is probably totally overrated, and come out like, these music media circle jerks are just the worst. This Frank Ocean Blonde and Endless are nowhere near Channel Orange. So again, let's at least acknowledge our blind spots when portraying ourselves surveyors of the musical landscape and coming up with these lists. These artists are just out here trying to eat, but just call a spade if you didn't get to the new Bon Iver. But let me know your thoughts and what you think of the best of 2019 lists that you've seen thus far. In my next video, I'm going to come clean on some albums that I either didn't listen to closely, or just didn't really remember and need to listen to again. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.